The dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the gloom of the old town archive annex, a forgotten corner filled with boxes nobody had touched in decades. My gloved fingers, stained with the grime of forgotten paper, traced the edges of a brittle, sepia-toned photograph. It wasn't just any photograph, it was a scene of pure joy, the town's founding festival, vibrant and alive, yet something was deeply wrong. A woman stood proudly in the very center, her face beaming, surrounded by townsfolk celebrating. But her name, her very existence, was absent from every official ledger, every historical account I had ever read. She was a ghost in plain sight, central to a moment, yet erased from memory, and the mystery pulled at me with an irresistible force. How could such a prominent figure simply vanish from the story of a whole town? My heart hammered with that familiar thrill of discovery, the unique excitement of finding a puzzle piece that changes the entire picture. You see, I believe every community is built on countless shoulders, not just the famous ones etched in stone. My passion, my true calling, is to find those forgotten shoulders, to unearth the stories whispered by the wind through old buildings, to give a voice to those who shaped our past but were somehow overlooked. This woman, Alara, her name finally emerging from a faded handwritten note on the back of the photograph, clearly embodied the spirit of early community life. Her proud stance and the genuine affection in the faces around her hinted at a profound, unacknowledged contribution. Her absence from the official narrative was more than just a gap. It felt like an injustice, a silent wrong that needed to be righted. If her story remained untold, our understanding of this town's very foundation would forever be incomplete. Armed with my discovery, I approached Mr. Henderson, the director of the Historical Society, a man whose love for order was only matched by his impressive collection of perfectly indexed files. Henderson was seated behind a desk piled high with neat stacks of municipal records, his spectacles perched on his nose, looking every bit the guardian of documented truth. I presented the photograph, my voice brimming with enthusiasm, and explained the curious discrepancy. He peered at the image, then at the name I had painstakingly uncovered. His brow furrowed. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, and politely but firmly dismissed it, calling it an unverified anomaly. He suggested she was likely a transient, perhaps a visitor who left no official trace, and therefore, no historical relevance. The town's history, he explained with a slight gesture to his immaculate filing cabinets, was built on documented facts, on names and dates found in official records, not on faded photographs and speculation. His words, delivered with calm authority, were a firm barrier, but they only fueled my determination. I just knew there was more to Alara's story, and I would have to dig deeper to understand this. Undeterred by Henderson's dismissal, I plunged headfirst into the town's oldest records, venturing beyond the official archives. I spent weeks sifting through obscure church ledgers, dusty family Bibles found in estate sales, and even old newspaper classifieds, searching for any flicker of Alara's name. It was a slow, painstaking process, like sifting sand for specks of gold. Most documents focused on land deeds, business transactions, or the political comings and goings of the town's founding fathers. But then, tucked away in the sprawling margin of a fragile, leather-bound church donation book, I found it, a tiny, almost illegible handwritten note, dated shortly after the photograph was taken. It spoke of a difficult winter, a lingering illness among the children, and then, a line that made my breath catch, saved by the kind woman who knows the ways of the woods, blessed be her knowledge. No name was given, but the description, the timing, and the clear reverence, felt like Alara. It was a faint whisper, yet it resonated with immense power, hinting at a hidden healer, a quiet protector, whose legacy was woven into the very survival of the community, even if her name was purposefully omitted from the official registry. This journey to uncover Alara's story felt deeply personal, a mission to shine a light on the often invisible forces that truly shape our world. It reminded me how easily crucial contributions can be overlooked, how quickly the quiet work of everyday heroes can fade from public memory. We see it even today. Think about the countless volunteers and unsung local heroes who step up in moments of crisis, whether it's helping neighbors recover from a hurricane or organizing food drives for those struggling with the rising cost of living. Their immediate impact is undeniable, yet their names rarely make the national headlines, and their long-term contributions might be forgotten decades from now. I understood that societies, through their official records, often prioritize certain types of achievements, like building grand structures or winning political victories, while the more subtle, nurturing efforts, the quiet acts of care and community building, often go unrecorded. This made Alara's story not just a local mystery, but a timeless lesson in the politics of memory and recognition, and it strengthened my resolve to ensure her vital work would finally be acknowledged, not just for her sake, but for the sake of a more complete and just history for all of us. My research led me to believe that some of the earliest town council meeting minutes, likely stored in the Historical Society's restricted founders vault, might hold more clues about Alara, perhaps even an explanation for her historical disappearance. I approached Mr. Henderson again, laying out my growing evidence, including the church ledger entry and several other anecdotal whispers I had uncovered. I asked for access to the vault, explaining that I felt Alara's role as a healer or community organizer during the town's vulnerable early years was becoming undeniable. But Henderson remained firm, his professional politeness masking a deep-seated resistance to anything outside his established framework. He reiterated the rules. Access to the Founder's Vault was strictly for documented, officially sanctioned research. He sighed, adjusting his glasses, and stated with a definitive tone, "We can't just chase every ghost, can we? Imagine the chaos if we started rewriting history based on vague mentions and old photographs. Order, investigator, order is what preserves history, not disrupts it." His words were like a locked door, sealing off what I felt was the most promising path forward, and the frustration was a heavy weight on my shoulders. I returned to the archives, but this time I read between the lines. I pulled the 1890 census and the property tax ledgers, scanning them not for what was there, but for what was missing. The frustration was palpable. Page after page listed, head of household, John Smith, or owner, William Turner. Women were ghosts here, listed only as Mrs. Smith or Ann wife, their individual identities swallowed whole by their husbands' names. That's when the realization hit me like a physical blow. Alara wasn't just missing because she was forgotten, she was missing because the system wasn't built to record a woman who stood alone. Without a husband to anchor her in these ledgers, or a property deed in a male guardian's name, she simply didn't exist in the eyes of the law. I wasn't just fighting bad memory. I was fighting the deliberate architecture of the past. After weeks of dead ends with official records, a desperate hunch led me to Martha, an elderly woman whose family had lived in the town since its very beginnings. She was known for her prodigious memory and her front porch, which was a repository of neighborhood gossip and family lore. I found Martha rocking gently on her porch swing, a patchwork quilt draped over her knees, and I showed her Alara's photograph. Her eyes, clouded with age, widened slightly, and a soft smile touched her lips. "Alara," she whispered, a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud before. Martha then recounted a family story, passed down through generations, about a woman known as the Woods Woman, a self-taught herbalist and midwife who had settled near the creek. Alara had saved countless lives during early epidemics, delivering babies and healing the sick when the nearest doctor was days away. But, Martha explained, some of the more proper founding families, who held sway in the town's official circles, viewed her natural remedies and independent spirit with suspicion, even fear. They saw her as a threat to their emerging formal institutions and religious doctrines. Therefore, they systematically excluded her from the official town records, almost as if erasing her existence, ensuring her legacy would be confined to whispered legends and grateful family stories, rather than celebrated history. The stakes of my investigation doubled. This wasn't just about an oversight, but about a deliberate act of historical erasure. The weight of Martha's revelation pressed down on me, heavy and sobering. It wasn't just a missing piece of history. It was a deliberate act, a conscious decision to silence a vital voice. Proving Alara's immense contribution, not just to the historical society, but to the collective memory of the entire town, felt like scaling a sheer cliff face. How could I challenge a narrative that had been woven into the town's very fabric for over a century, a narrative endorsed by official records and influential families? The few surviving oral histories, like Martha's, were precious but fragile, easily dismissed by skeptics as mere folklore, unsubstantiated tales. I imagined Henderson's polite but firm rejection, his insistence on documented facts over unverified anecdotes. It felt like an uphill battle, a fight against the very tide of established history. I found myself wondering if some truths, especially those inconvenient to the powerful, were simply destined to remain buried, forever lost to the sands of time, regardless of my best intentions or most dedicated efforts. The initial excitement of discovery gave way to a profound sense of despair that I had to dig deeper to understand this historical pattern of erasure, and it led me to another fascinating real-world fact. Before the advent of modern medical schools and formalized professions, which were predominantly male-dominated, women were often the primary healthcare providers in early communities. They served as midwives, nurses, and herbalists, sharing knowledge passed down through generations, effectively caring for about 80% of the population in colonial America, especially in rural areas. Yet, despite their indispensable roles in keeping communities alive and healthy, their names and achievements rarely made it into the official town histories, government records, or published scientific texts of the time. This wasn't just an oversight, It reflected a societal bias that valued formally recognized, male-led contributions over the informal, often domestic, yet profoundly impactful work of women. This understanding didn't just shed light on Alara's predicament, it also gave me a hint for a possible solution. If her work was so essential, there had to be some physical trace, some tangible evidence of her healing presence that transcended the written word, something that even the most meticulous bureaucrat couldn't dismiss as mere folklore. Despite this new understanding, the search for irrefutable, physical evidence proved relentlessly frustrating. I spent days revisiting every possible location connected to Alara, every creek bed, every patch of forest mentioned in Martha's stories, but found nothing that spoke definitively of her presence or work. The more I looked, the more the landscape seemed to swallow her memory whole. Each dead end felt like a personal failure, a betrayal of Alara's forgotten legacy. I imagined her, a woman who had given so much, now eternally obscured by the very passage of time and the deliberate actions of those who had sought to diminish her. Sitting amongst the dusty archives, surrounded by the official histories that had so cruelly omitted her, a profound sadness settled over me. It felt like her spirit, once so vibrant in that old photograph, was slowly fading away again, and I, the investigator, was powerless to stop it. The weight of her forgotten story, combined with the impenetrable walls of officialdom, threatened to break my resolve, making me question if some historical injustices were simply too deeply ingrained to ever truly be corrected. A detail from Martha's stories flashed in my mind: Alara's garden near the old mill ruins. I drove there as the sun began to dip, casting long, deceptive shadows. The area was a chaotic tangle of briars and collapsed masonry. For hours, I fought through the underbrush, scratching my arms and tearing my clothes, finding nothing but weeds and rubble. I was about to give up, admitting that nature had won, when my boot caught on something hard and unnatural beneath a thick carpet of ivy. I fell to my knees, panting, and began to claw away the earth and rotting leaves. It wasn't pristine. The stone was cracked down the middle and caked in decades of moss. I used my water bottle to wash away the grime, my heart pounding as faint, crude scratches revealed themselves. It took me 10 minutes to decipher the weathered carving. It wasn't a professional epitaph, but a jagged, hand-carved scrawl: Alara. She gave U.S. life. It was not a formal record, but it was real, tangible proof of her enduring impact. A bedrock of truth in a sea of historical silence. Armed with the stone, carefully cleaned and now clearly legible, and bolstered by Martha's unwavering testimony, I requested a formal hearing with Mr. Henderson and the Historical Society Board. The room was tense, filled with the hushed anticipation of judgment. Henderson, initially dismissive, began by reiterating the Society's reliance on verifiable records. But I laid out my case with passion, detailing the photo, the church ledger, the historical context of women's erasure, Martha's powerful oral history, and finally, presented the carved stone. Martha, her voice clear despite her age, spoke eloquently of Alara's kindness and unmatched skill, recounting specific instances of healing, of lives saved. Henderson picked up the stone, his meticulous fingers tracing the letters, his skepticism visibly wavering as he connected the pieces. The board members, initially stony-faced, leaned forward, their expressions shifting from doubt to profound consideration. The truth, once a fragile whisper, now stood solid and undeniable before them, challenging their long-held assumptions and demanding recognition for a forgotten hero. A heavy silence filled the boardroom. I placed the cracked stone on the polished mahogany table. The sound was a dull thud that seemed to echo. Beside it, Martha finished her testimony, her voice shaking but defiant. All eyes turned to Henderson. He picked up his spectacles, wiping them slowly, buying time. He didn't smile. He didn't look moved. He looked like a man who had been checkmated. He picked up the stone, tracing the crude letters, looking for a way to dismiss it, but the board members were already whispering, captivated by the physical proof. Finally, Henderson cleared his throat, his posture stiff. "Well," he said, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth, "the provenance appears substantial. We cannot deny physical artifacts, regardless of the lack of paper trails." He adjusted his tie, refusing to meet my eyes. "It seems an addendum to the founder's history is technically required. We will authorize a temporary display. For the sake of accuracy, of course." It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't enthusiastic, but it was a victory. The town, however, reacted with the warmth that Henderson lacked. The new exhibit, The Healer of the Woods, now features Alara's photograph prominently, alongside the cracked stone from her garden. Visitors stop and stare, learning for the first time about the quiet resilience of a woman whose official existence was almost erased, but whose legacy truly shaped this place. A small ceremony was held at the site of her former garden, attended by generations of Martha's family. It was a powerful reminder that history is not just about grand pronouncements or official decrees, but about the countless, quiet acts of courage and compassion that truly build communities. This journey has reinforced my belief that every community holds countless untold stories, waiting patiently for someone to listen. And here is where it gets interesting. What other unsung heroes, what other forgotten figures, are still out there, waiting for their truths to be brought into the light? Their stories are our collective memory, and they are essential for us to truly understand who we are.